Hello class, welcome back to Mr. Marlowe's online 6th grade math. Today we're going to be working on lesson 3 of module 6, which is titled Creating a Dot Plot. Right? Our targets for the day are I can create a dot plot from a data set. I can create a frequency table from a data set, and we'll go over what a frequency table is. And I can describe the distribution of the data using maximum, minimum, center, and spread. So let's get right into it with an example. Discovery Charter School students recently took the New York State math test. How do you think our friends in 5th grade did on the 3-point question? A 3-point question can receive a score of 0, 1, 2, or 3. Here is the data on the scores of the 3-point question for 16 randomly selected students. Okay, so I have here 16 scores of 16 students, and these show how well they did on the 3-point question. One student got a 3, another got a 0, this student got a 0, a 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 0, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 0, 3. You get the point, right? These are the scores. So we want to know, did our 5th grade friends do well? And it's kind of hard to tell when we're looking at data like this, right? Like I can look at this list of data and if somebody asks me, well, how did the 5th grade students do? I say, well, I see a lot of 3s, but I also see a lot of 0s, and I see a couple 1s mixed in and a couple 2s, so it's kind of really hard for my eyes to tell and my brain to figure out how well they actually did. Okay? So it's hard to tell, but maybe finding a way to organize the data will help. And what we have down here is a way of organizing data called a frequency table. And this frequency table is made up of 3 columns: score, tally, and frequency. Okay? Our scores are between 0 and 3. 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? The tally is going to be a tally of these scores. How many students got each of these scores? And finally, the frequency is going to describe that tally with a number. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I mean. So what we want to do is if we're tallying something, right, I'm going to put a hash mark here every time I see a student got a 0. Because now I'm in this row right here that's labeled 0. So let's go through our data and check. Well, there's 1 0, so I'm going to put a hash mark. And I'm going to cross that out as I do so I don't count it twice. There's another 0, so I'll put another hash mark and cross it out. Not a 0, not a 0, not a 0, 0. There's our third 0, and I'll put another hash mark, or I'm going to cross that out and I'll put another hash mark here. And it looks like we got one more 0 right there, so I'll add the 4th hash mark. Okay. Let's look at 1 and tally how many students got a 1. Stop me when you see a 1. You're supposed to stop me. There it is, right there. And cross that out. And it looks like there's just one 1. All right, so let's go back and now let's look at 2s. And let's tally the amount of 2s. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and last but not least, here let's tally the 3s. So 1 3, 2 3s, 4 3s. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 3s, 5 3s, 6 3s, 7 3s. Okay, so when you tally something, this is what it should look like. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with doing this when you're keeping score in a game, right? So the frequency is just the number that describes this tally. So if I had 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll just write a 4. I had 1 ones, so I'll just write a 1. I had 1, 2, 3, 4 twos, so I'll write a 4 for 2. And I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 threes. So already it's becoming easier for us to answer the question, how well did our 5th graders do? Right now I can look at this and I can say, oh wow, look at that. 7 5th graders got a 3 on the 3-point question. That's pretty good. 4 got a 2. That's not bad. I still got a lot of zeros, so maybe I got to work with those students, right? So what I did is I copied over this our frequency table over onto this page, okay? And now we're going to use this frequency table, which tells us how many times each score occurred, to make a dot plot. Remember, we looked at a dot plot yesterday. You guys should hopefully remember what that looks like, all right? So what numbers do you think need to be on the dot plot axis? And here is my dot plot axis right here. I already drew the line, okay? So what numbers do we need to use to label this axis? Well, we want to know how many students got a 0, how many students got a 1, how many students got a 2, and how many students got a 3. So this right here, this column of data right here, is what I'm going to use to label my axis, right? I say 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. My next step is going to be to take the data. I want to make sure you guys can see this. Ooh, barely get it in there. There we go. I'm going to take this data from up here from our frequency table, and I'm going to represent it down here as dots, right? So I want to know how many students got a score of 0. Well, 4 did, right? 4 students got a 0. So I'm going to put 4 dots right above one another, just like that, okay? How many students got a score of 1? 1 student got a score of 1. So I'm going to put 1 dot for that 1 student. How many students got a score of 2? 4 students got a score of 2. So I'm going to make 4 dots for those 4 students. And how many students got a 3? Right down here. How many students got a 3? Well, 7 students received a score of 3. So I'm going to put 7 dots for those 7 students. So what I've done is I've given you 2 new ways of visualizing data. Okay, we collected the data, we put the data into a list, but that's kind of hard to interpret. It's kind of hard to gain information from it. So what we can do is we can put it into a frequency table like we did up here, or we can put it into a dot plot like we did down here. All right. Remember, our axis is labeled with these possible scores, the possible outcomes, and these dots represent each student that got that possible outcome. 4 students got a 0, 1 student got a 1, 4 students got a 2, 7 students got a 3. Okay? So now we want to look at, and I want you guys to think about, what questions can be answered from this data? And let's think about this for a second. Okay? So what questions can be answered about this data? Okay? Well, how about what's the lowest? What's the lowest score? That can be answered from this data, right? A 0. What's the highest score? What about where's the center of the data? I should probably be putting question marks next to these. Or is the data spread out or close to that? Is the data spread or close together? Okay. How many students got a score of 1? How many? 1. How many students scored at least a score of 2? So these are all questions that I can answer from this dot plot. How many students got at least a score? How many students scored at least 2? Right? How many more students scored a 3 than a 2? Right? I could say, well, 7 students scored a 3, 4 students scored a 2, so I know that 3 more students scored a 3 than a 2. So it's just a really neat way to be able to organize our information, and then which allows us to interpret our information easier, and then we can make decisions based on that information. What questions cannot be answered from this data? Okay. Questions that can't be answered from this data are things like who scored a 1? Or will next year's 5th grader score the same? Right? This doesn't help me answer these questions. Will next year's 5th graders score the same? How about which students were boys and girls? Well, that dot plot doesn't tell me. Right? And finally, did all 5th graders in New York State score more 3s than any other score? Right? This is just for Discovery Charter School. It's not for New York State, so I don't know. Right? So again, things like what's the lowest score, what's the highest score, where's the center, is the data spread out or close, how many students scored a 1, how many scored at least a 2. These are all things that dot plots can help us with. They're all things that frequency tables can help us with. Questions that can't be answered are more specific to the individual, right? Who scored a 1? What's going to happen next year? Which students were boys and girls? Things like that nature. This won't help us with. Okay? So let's go back and recap. Today's lesson was on creating a dot plot. Our target was I can create a dot plot from a data set. I can create a frequency table from a data set. And I can describe the distribution of the data using maximum, minimum, center, and spread. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I will be here to help in any way that I can. Bye for now.